Okay, so welcome back to another interview of the teachers for the September YA Seminar Downunder. This interview, we've got Darren Friend Shihan. Sensei, thank you very much for giving us your time.
Oh, thank you, Ryan. Thanks for having me.
Um, we'll just jump. If do you have anything you wanted to say in way of overview or beginning before we jump straight into the questions?
No, just I'm looking forward to coming up to Brisbane and spending time with everybody who's coming to this event in September.
Yeah, it's shaping up to be a good time. And the weather in September, as you'd know, in Australia is fantastic, isn't it?
It is. It is. Yeah.
All right, so we'll start with some questions around your training background and your journey. Then we'll move into
Sure.
event focus and your thoughts around expectations. Then we'll move into some takeaways that and advice you have specifically for people coming to train, and then we'll branch out into some broader issues and questions. Okay, so to start, Sensei, can you tell us where or some of your pivotal moments from your earlier training in Melbourne and then your later training, how that took you into Japan?
Sure. So I started around about 1985, and no idea about martial arts or anything. Wasn't actually looking for martial arts or Aikido, but I happened to be working with Joe Tumbu Sensei. And during a lunch break one time, he was talking about this martial art I'd never heard of called Aikido. And so I went down to his dojo to check it out. I was playing university rugby at the time. And so I was looking like the team schedule wasn't working for me. So I was looking for something else to transition to, and was quite impressed with what Joe Sensei did. And so I started. And at that time, there wasn't a lot like traditional martial arts as we know it now in Australia. So there was karate, there was judo, etc. But Aikido was considered very exotic,
Mm.
and there were quite a few very experienced guys from other martial arts who brought a sort of sense of realism to the training at that time.
Okay.
So it was pretty rough and ready, is what I'm saying. um, and basically, it was a good learning ground for me at that time, and I became more and more interested as time went on. Eventually, I ended up working on as a bouncer on doors for a little while, and then I eventually went off to Japan myself. I think we had Nakano Sensei visit in 1991.
Right.
And I think that at that time, he would have been the highest ranked Yoshinkan person to visit Australia, I think.
Okay.
And then I went to Japan in 92.
Yeah. Yeah. Were those two things quite linked? Did his visit
Um,
stimulate
they,
something of interest in going to Japan?
it was, I'd already decided I was going. So it wasn't like Nakano Sensei was the catalyst for that, but he definitely had a big impact on everybody who trained at his seminar, and then he actually ended up being my sponsor for my visa later on.
Yeah.
So I guess it did have some direct and indirect
Yeah.
contact and influence on me. But yeah, I'd wanted to go by that stage, and so it was all basically just waiting for the time for the schedule to roll around to when I would go.
Yeah. And when you did decide to go to Japan, can you think of any pivotal moments in Japan that shaped the way you approach your training now and also your approach to what your to Aikido and your teaching of it now?
Yeah, sure. I mean, it's hard to say because it was a long journey for me. I was there 13 years.
Yeah, wow.
But I'd say that although I was like downgraded when I went to Japan, it was a very, as I said, rough and ready sort of Aikidoka at that point. And I really got polished, and I really learned the sort of efficiency of motion of Aikido and the power that that efficiency can bring to the technique is what I learned. I already, I knew the syllabus, but there's a lot of, within the syllabus, there's knowing it, and then there's knowing how to do it efficiently.
Yeah.
And so I really learned that. And then pivotal moments, it's hard to say exactly, but I mean, Kancho was still alive at that time, Shioda Kancho.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot to do with him, but my course was the last to graduate in front of him. So there was that. I think that I might be the last, or at least one of the last people to receive a Hombu Dojo instructor certificate, which is different to the regular certificates that they give out around the world for people to be instructors. That was a certificate to teach in Kancho's dojo.
Right.
Not many people have that.
Yeah.
And although that in itself wasn't pivotal, it did actually give me a sense of, well, I'm here doing something special, you know?
Yeah.
And then I was training under Inoue Sensei, Takano Sensei, and Chida Sensei. And each of them brought something different. They would have been, those three I would have been with them from roughly Kancho's death, 1994, through to when I left, 2005.
Yeah.
And, I was taking uke from one of those guys almost every day. Yeah. So that sort of made me, you have to always be ready. And it's hard, as I said, it's hard to quantify these moments of like this point or that point. It's more like the overall experience of that that I would say would have shaped me.
Can you, and this is just digressing from the point you made around taking uke for such high level practitioners all the time. Can you describe you probably may not be able to, and that's okay, but can you describe the nuance between those?
It is interesting because not many people can have had that sort of experience.
Yeah.
The interesting thing I found, because I would go to train with Takano Sensei on the weekend, because he's up in Yamanashi, outside of Tokyo. And I used to have a motorbike, so I'd get up early on a Sunday morning, ride up, train with him. And those classes were small. It was usually myself, Nakagawa Sensei, I don't know if you've ever come across her, and possibly one or two other university type students who were there. It was very small class. And then I'd do the morning class, the afternoon class. I used to have two classes, and then I'd ride back home again.
Right.
And he would always, very detailed instruction, and almost inevitably, whatever he pointed out to me on the Sunday, during the following week, Inoue Sensei would make the same point, or at least I caught on that they were teaching similarly. And their Aikido, if anyone looks at it, most people would say, oh, it's very different because their personalities are so different.
Right.
But the actual Aikido is very, very similar, in my opinion. Chida Sensei, a little bit different.
Okay.
Chida Sensei sort of out doing his own thing, but definitely I found that Inoue Sensei and Takano Sensei were very similar. Chida Sensei is very calm and brings this certain poise to it. It's very, very heavy when you feel it.
Right.
But it's very calm. Takano Sensei was, and they're both, Inoue and Takano are gone.
Yes.
They're both, well, Inoue, Takano Sensei, was very powerful, very fast, and seemed to be very light.
Right.
As opposed to Chida Sensei, who sort of seemed to be like heavy in a weird way.
Yeah. And
Inoue Sensei, who was such a gentleman, he could pack it. He could hit you pretty hard when he wanted to. So, and throw very hard as well. But it was interesting, and I got a lot out of it that way.
Well, yeah, it must have been such a spectacular thing to be able to feel that difference between, because obviously we talk a lot about the only real way to understand someone's technique is to feel it. You can be stay all you like, but you learn so much as uke, don't you?
You learn so much, but also I'd say that you can't be a strong stay if you don't have a strong uke.
Yeah.
Right, strong in terms of like being able to be thrown about, but they also have to bring it, you know.
Yeah.
And if it's like, you know, to use a sort of sports analogy, like just down the road from me is Henson Park, which is a famous rugby league ground. I don't know if you know it,
Yeah.
but the Sydney Swans often train there. And one of the best, I'm from Melbourne, so I'm an AFL guy.
Right.
One of the best footy games I've ever
Origin,
seen.
state of origin there.
Yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
One of the best footy games I've ever seen was the Swans A team versus B team, right? Because they're bringing it to each other, because there's no point in having A team strong
Yeah.
and B team weak, you know? Like you have to, you know, if you want to be a strong stay, you've got to have a strong uke.
Yeah.
And I
feels,
think I learned a lot, because I had to, especially for Takano Sensei, I had to really step up as uke.
yeah. Yeah, I guess it's, and I'm only assuming, I guess it's similar to what people describe in the greats of tennis as well. You know, you've got Federer, who would have always been great, but he may never have reached his heights had he not had Sampras and Nadal and others to push him,
Oh
to
yeah,
to
yeah,
make him. And
yeah,
Uke does that.
absolutely,
Uke does that as state.
absolutely. But it is, you know, something that you can see that people tend to forget. And like, you know, like if you look at Koru, you know, if in Koru the sensei is always Uchidachi.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that's because they can then apply the pressure,
Yeah.
to Shidachi, and like Shidachi can learn from that experience. And I think it's something that we have to be really careful in Aikido, that we don't let fall aside.
Mm. Mm. That's a good point. Um, I might move into the event now, if that's okay.
Sure.
Uh, just before we talk any more specifics around the event, but can you share with us your particular and personal vision for the event in September in Brisbane, and what you'd like the event to achieve?
Um, well, uh, everyone's coming together. Everyone should have a good time. But I mean, we're coming together with for a purpose, which is to train Aikido. So I hope that it inspires people to question what they're doing, right? To look at it and start to analyze, okay, the process of learning is the process of learning, and we have the kata for that. And we have the steps 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But we need to really question holistically what it is that we're doing. Why are we doing this? You know, martial arts is 2 words. If you look at it, it's 10 letters altogether, 7 for martial, 3 for art. And that's very much how I approach it. Like, I like to have that sort of balance. It's not 50-50,
Yeah.
but there is an element of art,
Yeah.
within it, but it's not the overall. It's like the martial balance within it. And then if you're thinking that way, then you have to start thinking about the why it is that this technique exists, and try to put yourself in a position 100, 200, 300 years ago where it would be much more relevant perhaps than it is today. Then it starts to make sense. Because a lot of Aikido doesn't make sense if you look at it from a sporting perspective. Grab both my wrists. Yeah. Like, why does Uke grab the wrist to begin with? So you have to start to think about that sort of stuff. And then it starts to make a bit more sense. So I hope people do think and try to go further, deeper, and make themselves better as Aikidoka.
Do you think that might influence your approach to how you'll take some of the sessions?
Yeah, possibly. I would hope so, because I like to look at the why.
Yeah.
You know, I like to teach from the why perspective, because the how perspective, how we do the techniques is pretty well covered. You know, we've got all the kata, it's all being videoed. It's step 1, 2, 3, 4. You don't really need me to come down or come up from Sydney to explain how to do Shihanage or whatever.
Yeah.
But the why of some of the steps, maybe we haven't really thought about or looked at. And I'm not saying I have all the answers. I always challenge my students to come up with questions that I don't know the answer to. Because if they do, it's given me something to think about.
Okay.
Most of the time I do have the answers, but, you know, occasionally I'll get a red herring that's like, gee, I never thought about that.
Yeah.
And then you have to think, why is that part there? Why are we doing this? What is the reaction that we're looking for in this particular situation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. And I guess it feeds off too when you're teaching different people. Some people are confronted with difficulties that we may not have experienced before, and we've
Oh,
got
yeah.
help solutions to those that perhaps we haven't experienced personally.
Yeah, absolutely. There's, you know, a lot of people seek out Aikido as a way of dealing with different trauma and different, you know, life experiences that they've had. And we can't be expected to have had every experience ourselves. So we have to be quite sensitive to what the student is looking for when they step into the dojo. That's you know, that's what I find the hardest, is actually trying to figure out why are you here? What do you want?
Yeah, yeah,
And then hopefully, if I can figure that out, I can give them something that's going to be suitable for them.
yeah.
Yeah.
Do you ever find though that that what they want and what they need aren't necessarily the same thing?
Oh, yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um,
And then, it's that. I mean, that's, you know, I mean, you're a teacher by trade as well as a, you know, Aikido instructor. But that is the role of the teacher. Yeah, is to make things apparent to the students so that they want to go in the direction that you're leading them, and
yeah,
they understand why.
even though it's uncomfortable to them.
Yeah, yeah.
One of the innovations of this seminar we're attempting to include is a focus of or a common focus across the sessions on a particular principle or concept that each teacher will share as they take their sessions on the mats. What are your thoughts on this approach in a seminar setting?
I think it's going to be very interesting. It's going to allow the students to look at a principle that the teacher is teaching and see it approached from different perspectives, which is slightly different to if we were to teach the same technique.
Yeah.
We would probably all pretty much teach that technique the same way. You know, it might be a very, very subtle difference here or there that only a few people might pick up, but principles means that, you know, my approach to one thing might be slightly different to another person's, and how we shape the principle, even though it's the same thing, we're looking at it from different perspectives. So I think it's going to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
In fact, it's that part of the seminar that I kind of want to be sitting as a fly on the wall myself to observe what everybody does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess being a teacher too would make it more difficult because you'd want to, as you said, you'd want to see how other teachers approach.
Exactly. Yeah, it's going to be. I think there's going to be quite a bit of like, you know, what's happening over there. But no, I think it's a very good idea. I don't think. I think there's been a tendency in recent times to just show up and go through the syllabus.
Yeah.
And we've got quite a depth of instructors here in Australia. The students don't need to be led through the syllabus from A to Z.
Yeah.
You know, they need to have a deeper understanding behind those fundamentals, and so that they can grow themselves and like basically help to teach themselves once the seminar is finished.
Mm-hmm. And in springboarding off that point, as we move into outcomes, takeaways, and advice, what sort of mindset would you suggest participants bring to this ahead of time to in their preparation?
Be open. Be open to ideas. Try things. Don't. We're going to be doing techniques that everybody knows, but let let it happen. Let things go in a way that you're not used to.
Yeah.
And if you think about it, a technique is a solution to a problem. All right. The problem being obviously the attack. Here's a possible solution. We have, one that everyone has techniques that they've learned that they feel work for them, right? But maybe there's another way of doing approaching the same problem. And so then you'll have two approaches or possibly three or four approaches to the same problem once you finish this seminar, right? So be open and just take it all in and, take what you like and discard what you don't like. It doesn't matter.
And in terms of those takeaways, if you say there might be three or four other ways in which you approach a problem and find a solution, or approach the technique and affect uke. How would you, in terms of that takeaway, how would you suggest students take these takeaways away and implement them and continue them and make them part of what they do beyond the seminar? So how does the training continue beyond the seminar?
Well, I think that's where you just have to think a lot, right? Yeah, at the level that we're talking about now, we're talking about people who know their technique. They know right foot, left foot. They know the kata. They know the steps to do. They can do it slow. They can do it fast.
Yeah.
But they've got to try to break it down again and look at what fundamentals are behind this. What other sort of influences are there on the technique and how it's done? Because there's a lot of subtle stuff that, if you just look at Aikido from a sort of as if it was just, on video perspective, there's a lot of subtleties that you won't pick up from watching it on a video. But by being in a class and feeling it from a teacher, you might pick up things that you hadn't thought about before. And so I'm just be open to that.
And on that regard, would you suggest people try and get to be uke for as many teachers as they can?
Just be there. Try and get as much experience as you can. Yeah.
Good advice. Thank you. We might finalize now on community and connection and some broader points around Aikido and Yoshinkan.
Sure.
How do you see the seminar contributing to the growth and connection within the martial arts community broadly, but more specifically, just the Yoshinkan community?
Okay. Well, for us, Yoshinkan people, it's a chance to meet and sort of cross-pollinate with different people. I've been lucky enough to have, through Yoshinkan Aikido, I've got friends all around the world, right, which I wouldn't have if I hadn't done Aikido. And it allows us just to sort of to develop those friendships, develop those connections. It's, tentative at first, but, things can happen. And by mixing and matching and seeing different things, having those different experiences, I think it just makes everyone a much more well-rounded martial artist.
Yeah. And because I know just in the organization of the event, there'll be a handful of people who are not from the Yoshinkan style.
Okay.
There will be a few people from different stages and places, which will be good. I think.
Yeah, no, they're welcome. Yeah, it's good for people, good for us, good for them. Who knows? Maybe we'll convert them. I don't know.
Which brings me to another question. Is Aikido something that's complete, or is it something it's very useful as a supplementary art to other martial artists, do you think? Does it have a place?
Absolutely.
Both in terms of who just wants to solely dig deep into Aikido or is it a supplementary thing for others?
I mean, I think Aikido is sort of the original mixed martial art, right? If you look at where Shiba Sensei brought everything that he's brought together, it wasn't just Aiki Jiu-Jitsu. He brought in a lot of other things and just added it all into the mix. So it is very good from that perspective. It's good for people to both do Aikido from a different martial art point of view, and it's fine for people who do Aikido to go and train other martial arts. I got no problem with that. I've done it myself, as have you, and you tend to stick with what works for you or what feels right for you. So if Aikido feels right for you, that'll always be your base.
Yeah.
And even though you might go off and train other things, your base will be what carries you through, right? And I'm sure you've got people from other martial arts training with you now.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I've got people training with me now.
I welcome it.
Most of the time, they say to me that whatever their key form, the art that they've come from, has improved because of the Aikido that they've done. That tends to be always the case.
Do you know what
from my perspective?
My biggest improvement was when I was playing rugby league and doing.
Oh yeah.
Because I stopped playing for a while, and then I was just doing Aikido, and then I went back for a few seasons just for fun, and it was like something had changed.
Yeah.
My ability on the field, I wasn't doing anything different, but I don't know what it was, but I can only put it down to Aikido enhancing my ability to play rugby league. Now, it wasn't.
I'm sure. I mean, you're using everything. Aikido is a 360-degree martial art, right? So you're using everything, and your coordination, your capacity to sort of like read body language, all of that is affected.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things that I say to people is like, okay, we're doing a martial art. It's a self-defense martial art. How many of you have ever had to defend yourselves physically? And almost everyone will say, not me, right? Very few people have. Then I'll say to them, but how many times has Aikido saved you and you haven't even realized it? Yeah. Like so many little things, having that awareness, spotting the danger before it gets to you, avoiding difficult, dangerous situations, not stumbling over, etc., etc. There's so many times where I think, oh yeah, I reacted or defended by blocking, a swinging door or object because I've practiced it every day for X number of years, and it just instinctively happened.
Yeah. I know myself, being a motorbike rider, it's saved my life a few times.
Sure. Yeah.
Same reason.
Yeah.
Final question. What are your thoughts on the way Aikido is trained today compared to how it was practiced when you first began and went to Japan? Is there a distinction? Is it the same? I'll leave it up to you.
I mean, the technique is the technique, right? So the techniques don't really change. What does change is the approach that people bring to it. Right. And as I sort of indicated before, I mean, if you have a strong uke, you'll have a strong stay. I think a lot about the Budo, the martial side of what we're doing. Now, that doesn't mean that we have to bruise up each other every class.
Yeah.
But it does mean that I show a lot of respect to my uke.
Yeah.
And I respect them, not in the sense of like, oh, they're a nice person, da, da, da. I respect them like a tiger or a wild animal. Something that I need to like maintain the mai, maintain the metsuke, the eye contact in the distance. I need to have my focus completely on them for the entire time, from when we first bow to when we finish, there should be no drop of that concentration. And that is very tiring training to do. And I'm always on to my people about that. But I see that slipping quite a lot, where people get kind of very...
And the physicality, the two sides of it is necessary.
Yeah. And if you've ever had real confrontation, I'm sure you have and I have, those parameters, those very, very basic, which a lot of people think are sort of esoteric Japanesey type things, right? Not the bow, but everything else.
Okay.
That's going to be what's going to guide you around this situation and control the person. And they'll pick up on the vibe. People pick up on the vibe.
Totally.
I've had people walk away from me. I mean, inside, I've been like, but I've shown nothing on the outside.
Yeah.
And they've just like, well, they walked off. But if I'd been sort of insular, if I'd been jovial, if I'd been anything else, it could have gone quite bad.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I don't see that as much as I would like to see it in terms of training.
Well, that's a good point for people to take on board as they come to the seminar.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, if that's what you're there for, if you're not there for that, I'm not really sure what Aikido is for then, because Yoshinkan Aikido it's not a dance, right? It's not a sport. So you've got to think, what is it? Why are we here? Why are we training this? And if you're serious about it, you'd think deeply about that.
Yeah. Final point, Sensei, before we wrap up. Any final words?
From me? Look, I'm looking forward to it. I hope it's going to be a great time. I think there's 70 people coming so far. Yeah. And it will be a wonderful event. First time that we've had such an event in Brisbane, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. And I'm really, really looking forward to it. So, if there'll be plenty of time in between classes, after class, to ask questions as well, or just catch up, introduce yourself. So please do. And I look forward to meeting everybody on the mat.
Thank you very much. I won't take any more of your time. It's been insightful and a great conversation. So
thank you very much. I've enjoyed chatting with you a lot.
We look forward to seeing you in Brisbane.
Thanks. See you then. Peace.